So, welcome to all the panelists and all the participants. I see many familiar faces in the audience. Congratulations to Dvara on the 15th anniversary, and of course, coming up with a great report. It does quantify a lot of hypotheses that we have. So, keep it up. I hope it becomes some sort of a annual tracking study that will help a lot. The topic given to the panel is to discuss data-driven approach to farmer financing. Very relevant and contextual topic. And I'm very fortunate to have a wealth of experience sitting on the dais. So thanks to Dwara for getting us together. Just to set the context for first, on the topic, we know that farmer financing or agri-value chain financing is a huge opportunity. The government has set a priority sector lending target for the sector at about 18 lakh crores in the last budget, and it keeps going up about by 5 to 10% every year. Having said that, a large number of farmers, especially smallholder farmers, which is about 125 million odd farmers in India, I think 60-70% of them don't have access to institutional credit. They end up borrowing from a lot of informal sources. The cost of capital ranges from 24% to 60% to even 100% per annum. Which is extremely high. Not many businesses in the world make money when the cost of capital is upwards of 20%. So clearly, the cost of capital, access to institutional capital are big challenges when it comes to farmer financing. So how do we solve for them? Thankfully, if you look at last 10 years, the kind of digitization that we've seen in the agri-value chain is unprecedented. And thanks to a lot of startups in the agricultural sector, there are over 3,000 startups who are working in it. Most of them are working on some sort of digital tech solution. We have seen digitization of agri-input value chain. We have seen digitization of the pre-production to production, to post-harvest, to distribution, to wholesale, to retail, to consumer. So in a way, digitization is also driving some sort of integration in the value chain. And clearly, of course, a lot of these models developed by startups was not meant for financing initially, but since a lot of data is getting generated, we are seeing some sort of convergence between agri-tech and agri-fintech, which is a good news for the sector. Coupled with it, we are also seeing government participation. I think Professor Chand already talked about it on various initiatives. Clearly, AgriStack is one of the very large initiatives digitizing farmer ID, farm ID, and crop ID. And if we link it together, it becomes a very powerful digital tool solving for a lot of challenges in the Indian agriculture value chain, and lending being one of the most important use case of this stack. Of course, government is moving, as Professor Chand said, that there's a humble beginning which is already being made. But I'm also seeing a lot of interest from the state governments. Government of UP, if you were tracking last week only, they come up with a RFP for developing crop stack, which is one part of the agri stack, capturing crop signatures and acreage and yield for all the crops within the state for all the 75 districts. Since I'm working with IFC on this project, we were quite appalled by the pace with which the state government moved on it. And the whole idea is to culminate this crop stack into agri stack in time to come. And I'm very hopeful if UP moves, I'm sure other states are bound to move. So clearly a lot of activities happening on the ground, which is really going to change the way lending to the sector is being done. Thankfully, the banks, which are a big stakeholder, are also becoming more and more proactive. I worked with SBI for almost 2 years to build model for them for partnership with agri-techs to lend digitally to farmers. Again, humble beginnings, but very encouraging to see likes of SBI and many other public sector and private sector banks trying to sort of use innovative digital tools for the purpose of lending to farmers, for KYC, for data collection, for risk assessment, risk mitigation, all the way to loan recovery. And this we are seeing not just in crops, but also in ancillary industries like dairy, fisheries, poultry, which is quite interesting. So I'll pause here and probably invite the panelists for their views. I'll start with Dr. Bhanwala. Uh, he has so much experience being the ex-chairman of NABARD. So what's your view on the policy side, how the policy perspective for agri-lending can change with more and more digital tools being available to bankers? And what's your view on sort of some of these digital public goods which are being created by the government? How that's going to solve the challenges that we have seen in the sector when it comes to farmer financing?
First of all, thank you for inviting me. Compliments to Dvara for a 15 years successful journey. Samir, you are the one to receive it, all the others founded it. So it's a good time. And first of all, before I say on what Hemendra has said, it was always a pleasure to hear Professor Chand. You're talking about data-driven agriculture. He talks about data-driven policy research. I'm a fan of whatever he writes. It's empirically very well written, argued, and a lot of deductions based on that. So good to have him as.
When an entity does something, an organization does something to make available either services or goods for a farmer, it looks at it from its own point of view. Whereas if you have an ONDC kind of a stack, it looks neutral to seller or buyer. So that's a big change. I think if more platforms or more goods and services and if more attraction to the existing ONDC itself happens, it will be first good thing for digital agriculture. That's what I would say. Presently, it's primarily meant for goods. I hope services are equally important and they are offered and added to this. This is the narrow view I have. I may be wrong in my perception. This is when I had an interaction with the ONDC founder, this is the impression I got. I also could not have detailed discussions, but if services are available, very good. Because in long term, agriculture, small farmer is going to use services of assets rather than the asset themselves. I think bigger use case is going to be for those things because paying capacity, it's something like firms, Why make capital investment? Why do OPEX? So it's something similar. And we have seen the large success in North India of this, etc. So states need to encourage this. And can some of these services, no, we had earlier states encouraging capital investments in asset purchase, etc. But even for solar today exists. So can some of these services be also subsidized? Why can't you look at it? And on some basis, and so that the small farmers gain on account of this, rather than the well-endowed ones. So that's the second change I'm suggesting. Third thing is, I would say digital literacy of a farmer. We took, before fintech could succeed, we had huge financial literacy outreach by NABARD and other banks. So can we have, and now our Reserve Bank and some other entities also, even NGOs came forward. So can we have digital literacy of farmers? It comes slowly. Ultimately it is a case use which determines the success of most of the kitne aadmiyon ne download kiya, use kiya. This is what everybody talks about. Valuations depend on that. And if there is no use case created, so can some of the startups come forward and create a platform for digital literacy of farmers? Can institutions like NABARD, state governments be roped in for something of this kind of an initiative? Fourth point from my side. I'm sorry I'm taking a little longer, but I'll at perspective. Now, faith, somebody said. Trust and faith. Now, why people, even if the services of Government of India or state governments are sometimes, take time consuming, etc., why people go back to them? There's a faith. Trust. Now, I'll give you a small example. I'm on the board of Arya Warehouse and Logistics. they had some 10-year decadal stuff. So their GM after the inauguration, etc., came to me, sir, I'm very thankful to you. I said, I've never met you yet. Why you have to be thankful? He says, I went to some NGOs to promote my services. And he was not ready. I mean, they were interacting with 20 FPOs and SR district, 23 FPOs to be precise. And when he says, even Harsh Bhanwala, who has been ex-chairman of NABARD, is on our board, they felt little comfortable. So this trust creation, how to win over the trust, is very critical for these small entrepreneurs, digital entrepreneurs, physical entrepreneurs, and let me tell you, not pure digital. You have to be physical to win their trust as well. So if they see there was a reference, I think there's a very good reference. Can you have retired people from governments, banks, reputed NGOs, teachers, who have a standing, make a list of the same, who can infuse trust into your organization's working, because this cannot just be carried out by the state governments themselves or the banks themselves. They need to partner. So that's the sixth point, that digital agriculture or digital lending of digital agriculture lending cannot be just the sphere of banks. They will have to partner with NBFCs, banking correspondents, and others. Lastly, I have some other points also, but lastly, I think Professor Chand mentioned that, and data protection is an issue. When you deal with the digital data, farmer is naive today. You never know, the farmer organizations crop up and they make him literate. So from the day one, you have to be ensuring that there is a data privacy, data thefts, etc. are not there, and conflict resolution mechanism, which almost is absent today. In any startup mechanism, if I lose something, where do I go? Consumer protection, that fight, the forums, etc. are almost not there, and some of the services being offered are such that Consumer Protection Forum also doesn't understand those things. So, can you have your own internal mechanism of conflict resolutions? I think that's to begin with. Thank you.
No, thanks, Dr. Bhanwala. Very valid points. Point on trust. My experience with agri-tech clearly says that when agri-tech goes from Bangalore to Baranbaki, no one listens to him. So you have to partner with the local entrepreneurs, and clearly, as you said, retired government officials or FPOs or NGOs.
Opinion makers.
Opinion makers. A lot of VLEs actually, village level entrepreneurs who belong to those villages, definitely creates a lot of trust. I'll take it from your last point on data privacy and data governance. And my next question is for Purvi. Since there's so much of data which is getting generated, going to be generated, there's bound to be data asymmetry, right? And those who have data, those who can share data will probably benefit more than the ones who can't, right? So how do we solve for these challenges which is arising out of data asymmetry, concerns around data privacy, concerns around how data is going to be utilized? I think one of the challenges which even AgriStack, as part of the AgriStack committee, we are sort of discussing, how to build data governance. If the government is sharing data with the private sector, how do we make sure that it is used for the right purposes? So these are the very, very prime concerns. So if you have any views around it, that'll be helpful.
It is a revolution in waiting. What is the difference? We've always used data as a very important factor. When we say, for example, the Green Revolution time, the fundamental of Green Revolution was the data gap between actual yield and potential yield and bridging and whatever we did to sort of bridge that gap. And so I think data has always been an important thing. What is transformative now is the thrust on data utilization. This is also a country which had the Indian Statistical Institute that was formed in 1931, one of the first ones in the world to have a dedicated statistics institute of a national level, right? And so we've always realized, in my Africa days, we used to constantly talk about what's the difference, what are the major differences between Indian agriculture system and African agriculture system. And one of the topmost was the data availability and the data collection infrastructure this country has always had. Now, the transformative thing is about data utilization and also data stacking, which was mentioned by Dr. Bhanwala, Professor Chand, and others. Rather than single-use data, we are now emphasizing on data stacking. I think these are the two major, the data analytics, and since we are sitting on the Dvara platform, which also looks at fintech and so forth, I think a huge opportunity in data analytics when it comes to agri-tech, right? In agri-tech, for example, in 2018, the ag-tech analytics market in the world was about $535 million. Just in 4 years, it has gone to $1.6 billion. So data analytics and interpreting data, whether it is in form of dashboard, whether it is in form of sort of running a common thread across various data that are available, I think is something that offers huge opportunity. In a country like India, when we talk about anything that is of a transformative use, and to your question, Hemendra, I think one of the very important thing is the inclusiveness. And therefore, it's very important to talk about the data infrastructure that we have and data we have, but it is also very important to talk about some of the data gap, and for that matter, some of the gaps in our ability to reach out digitally with some of these data and data utilization also. And couple of things I would like to flag very quickly on that one is number one is the inclusion of types of farmers. Of course, we know the gender gaps in that. Women farmers, which are about 43% of the crops and about 73% of the livestock farmers, the access to digital among women farmers is about 26% less than the normal men farmers. So I think that's one gap. But one very important gap we need to see in many of these databases that we see, which also makes the fundamental to a lot of policy decisions and all that, is landless farmers and land holding farmers, and there is a major data gap between that. And I really appreciate the recent thrust on not categorizing and defining farmer by the amount of land the person holds, but it also in the amount of produce one brings to the market, and defining the farmer that way. The second is major sectoral differences. If one looks at the general database in the country, more than 70% of the database that we have are centric to about 8 to 9 commodities. And therefore, there are major data gaps in many other commodities, such as, for example, horticulture crops, such as, for example, some of the livestock sector. We have very good data now building on, for various reasons that Professor Chand also mentioned, on dairy, on poultry, and so forth, but many other sectors, for example, small ruminant sector, there is very limited data available. So I think that's the second point I would say in differences on commodity. And the third one is in difference across the value chain. We have much better data infrastructure available on production and productivity data, and very little on the market-related data and the price realization data. So in the study that Dvara was presenting, there was a mention of cost of production, but I think price realization is a major data gap. So there are some of these things that's very, very important, and I really see Dr. Bhanwala to add to what you said, I think one of the very important functions of the policies is quality control in some of these digital infrastructure as well. If one sees, for example, Raigada districts of Odisha, which is not one of the most prominent in terms of technology adoption and all that, on an average, a farmer has access to 73 different types of apps that a farmer can download, right? Who's doing the quality control, who's doing the consistent data, and that again brings a huge thrust on the trust issue that we've spoken about, right? If I'm a farmer in Raigada, there are 5 apps which may be giving me 5 different information about what pesticide to spray, depending upon which company is, frankly speaking, supporting or sponsoring or maintaining that app, and so that I think trust will also come from a very good sort of quality control. So maybe, Professor Chand, like an ISI standard for these agriculture data and agriculture information, digital information that goes to farmers, I think is something that that can be very, very crucial as well.
Just to add 2 things, very good things, Sir, I think we require repositories for data in agriculture, certified repositories. That is absent today. You same agency you ask, it comes out with a very different data. I think for analytics or policy, it is important. Second point, just one more thing. Rightly said, sir, lending is almost not available. There was a reference for absence of lending for small farmers in many other these things. But I would go a step further. It is not as much the small farmer. We have 8 crore those Kisan cards. It is basically the landless farmer, leasehold farmer who leases somebody else's land. I think this category is going up. And rightly said by her, this category is not getting the thing, and the digital agriculture and lending can be a great source of help to them. Similarly, sector-wise, horticulture is growing very fast. Hardly any credit to horticulture. If you ask any bank, there is nothing flowing to them, and it's still growing.
Yeah. And thank you. And if I can add one more, I think among the landholders also, we have very classically, and we in the sense, we as a world, I'm not talking just about India, generally everywhere, we categorize a farmer by the amount of land that person holds, and not by the quality of soil that person has. I can perhaps have 50 acres of land, can be categorized as a very large farmer and not benefit out of any government schemes, for example. But if that 50 acres of land is an arid land, it is actually worse than 1.5 acres of fertile land that I may be holding. So I think in Rwanda, a small country like Rwanda did a very good experiment on what they called it as field zoning, from the same field, what are the different fertile and less fertile zones, and creating crop advisories according to that. So I think that's another among the land holding capacity. Also, there are categories.
I think it's pretty interesting. I didn't want to interrupt you. I think we all know how complex this sector is, and the point that you mentioned are very, very relevant, especially from inclusivity perspective. What Sir said on the sharecroppers, I think for 30-40% of farming is sharecroppers in India, and we don't have any record. In fact, one of the primary challenges in agri-stack, how do we capture? Because none of these leases are written leases; they are oral leases. But the revenue sharing model. So that's going to be a challenge, but I think Odisha, through their Kaliya scheme, has figured out how to capture share farmer data, and that could be a good sort of case study to.
Just one small interruption before you go to them. I'm sorry. Since you're touching a point, if it is landholders are almost 30%, let me say 34, you said, they can best be benefited by this kind of ecosystem, digital agriculture. Why? Because they are anyway accessing market. They may not have production assets with them. Their cash flows can come in. if they go through a e-marketplace or through some other place. So if those things come, then cash flows can be financed.
Okay.
So the access of credit to these entities for lessee farmers to great extent come, and I mean this platform is well suited for them because this is neutral to assets, the market access part of it, the productive assets.
Right. So cash flows based financing instead of asset based financing. Yeah. Great. So I'll move from the right side to the left side. I think one data point which really impressed me in the study which was presented is that when it comes to benefit to farmers, 70% said timely disbursement, and I think 56% said cost of the credit being lower or something like that. Which is quite, intuitively you think cost of the credit will always be at the top of the mind for the farmer. But what came out is a timely availability of credit itself is such a big benefit. And that leads to the question, and that's for Amit. Amit, how do we develop this farmer-centric approach when it comes to financing? And as Bhanwala sir said that, of course, value chain financing can be done on the basis of cash flow. But if you look at farmers, smallholder farmers, especially sharecroppers, women farmers, Purvi mentioned the livestock sector is dominated by women farmers. How do we inculcate that farmer-centric approach when we are building financial products for these communities?
Thanks, Hemendra. And before I answer your question, Samir, with your permission, when I got the invitation to be part of this panel, my immediate response was no. I said I'd prefer to be in the audience and listen to the panel. It'll be a great learning experience. And I was still feeling like that when I was hearing the conversation so far. And then when I discussed with Hemendra, I requested him to ask me the easiest and the most dumb of questions, which is why I agreed to be on this side, but clearly he's gone back on his word. So I'm fumbling for the answer, but nevertheless, let me give it a shot. At a very high level, I'm just thinking aloud, we have roughly about 4 crore KCC operative holders, while the farmer numbers are around 12 to 14 crores, depending upon what you look at. At the same time, and these are by and large landholding farmers, and if you look at the guidelines, the regulations, it's fairly prescriptive. कौन कहाँ पे क्या बोएगा, उसका मल्टीपल कितना होगा, उसके हिसाब से वो सारा कैलकुलेशन है. And most of what was designed fairly long back still holds true today. And at the same time, we have JLG and SAG ecosystem where there is no collateral. And through market forces also, we've been able to develop a very good ecosystem. If you look at the JLG model, there is a both primary and secondary market because of the efficiencies involved. At the doorstep when you want and within the range how much you want, it's available. And SAG also has progressed considerably in terms of quantum, and it has got digitized. Also, you can actually ask for a loan online by going to a platform. Now, roughly these women borrowers from this side are 6 to 8 crores, let's say 6 crores. Unfortunately, we don't have a household level view today. It's very likely there would be considerable overlap. The KCC borrower comes from the same family from where the SAG or a JLG borrower. So we've not been able to see it a little more holistically. And I think now time is coming where this would be possible largely because of the data. And as databases start talking to each other, this would be possible. So my submission would be few things. One, I personally felt, I continue to feel FPO is a very good channel which has not been leveraged as much for credit delivery to its member. These are early days, experiments happening, but as FPOs mature, this could be a distribution layer which could be very effective. There would be various models which will emerge. This could be encouraged, business facilitators or whatever we may call loan service providers as per the new digital loan guidelines. So that's clearly one. Second, as I said, we need to look at the household level and create enabling policies where a KCC equivalent is available to the women farmer who actually doesn't exist on paper, which is very unfortunate because of the land holding requirements, so on and so forth. If you can structure something riding on the SHG network and the FPOs that get created riding on that network, there is a very good credit history available. Then you have an aggregator like FPO, which married with the data set that comes, this could also be a good pathway to rely not just on the standard template of KCC and develop more products. I would say, if you talk of scale, these two ecosystems, if they intermingle and talk to each other, that would be very useful. Last, you touched upon the SBI, AgTech partnership, BC partnership. While these are early days and we are facing challenges, I strongly believe that would be the way forward, which will try and break that standard template product where we don't rely on the land holding and that kind of stuff, and sharecroppers, landlord farmers also start getting loans riding on the data information that is available. Current challenge is also because the supply side is not able to absorb this information appropriately. That capacity is that needs to be built, especially among RRBs. I remember, sir, cooperatives and RRBs, NABARD was always providing a helping hand, and again, probably we need a similar fund where RRBs and co-ops can absorb this data, use this data, and deliver credit through channel partners. That would make a lot of a difference, because large part of KCC, SHG loan, they are perhaps in certain geographies, they are the sole loan service provider or the lender. Unless until those capacities get built, we will be struggling with paper-based credit and things like that. So broadly, these 3-4 things I think would be a very good pathway to break this barrier.
I think he raised a very important point. These banks are closest to farmers even today, more close to commercial banks.
Yes.
Although the number of commercial banks has gone up, credit flow is higher in commercial banks, the share is less today, around 20% taken together. But since their majority of their clientele is farmers, and if they have to be taken to technology, what we did at that time in NABARD, when I was there, we did was for the first time a cloud-based solution to CBS we brought in. They don't know themselves how to handle data, to technology. Neither they have the capability to, to upgrade regularly or understand the implications so well. So we got in Wipro, TCS, etc. to really do this for them. And for the first time, cloud-based banking happened. Subsequently, others have come in. Even commercial banks have come in. So this, what you're saying is, for effective use of this newer technology inputs that will come in for farmers through these apps by these players, I think present NABARD management should take a lead in terms of providing a common technology platforms or training people accordingly. We had cloud for this, so some solution should be found so that effectively, immediately, it's easy to implement once a replicable model is found for them. Small in each district, and you move on. Thank you. That's a good suggestion.
Yeah, Amit, your answers were really good to my googly, so you definitely deserve to be on the dais. Clearly, I think the point on community lending, I think I'm seeing even in agri-tech models, there is a pivot happening from lending to individual farmers to SHGs, JLGs, and FPOs. I think that also takes asset out of the equation, right? Typically land ownership. So that's a very good suggestion. And the point which Dr. Bhanwala mentioned on building capacity at the RRB level, that's going to be very critical. That takes me to Raj. The question which I always ask a lot of startups is, do we have products for farmer financing? KCC is of course sort of the flagship product, but Purvi talked about the various value chains, right? Dairy, the working capital cycle, 15 days, horticulture, if you look at vegetables, 30 days, 60 days. If you look at some of the field crops, 3 months, 4 months. then we have a post-harvest financing, then we have asset-based financing. Do you think we have products in place, or place like Samunati, we need to innovate a lot on building products which are relevant for the market?
Thank you. First of all, thank you, Dvara E-Registry. Congratulations and wonderful report. And many things that I would really love to read it and come back to you. One thing that I got attention, my attention is farmers still prefer doorstep disbursement, right? That's great to see. And again, another thing, what he was mentioning, it's tough to sit in between bankers, and particularly who are veterans in this field and understand this domain a lot. So I try not to repeat anything that what they have said, and limit my discussion only to the tech part. Particularly on the one side, I understand your question, Hemendra, do we have enough innovative products? We do have innovative products. But we see, again, as a Samunati, we see as a big gap between making the products discoverable to the farmers and taking them to them, right? So we are 140 million plus farmers. The feet on the street efforts are not going to help. We need to really digitize this entire process of discovery, signing up, disbursement, whole management of the loan needs to be digital. And that leads to big challenges with respect to data now. I'll tell a classic example, it's West is not very far from this issue. It's not just the literacy that's causing this problem. One of the major, largest retailer, known as Walmart, right? So the people who are coming from the rural areas are common Americans to their websites and searching for red bottle with blue cap is what they want to buy. There were enough products. Happens to be Tide, a detergent. But the problem is the product content and how you are actually promoting and making your product digitized, again, customized, targeted to the intent of the, the customer. In our case, it's even more difficult. First of all, most of the products we are talking about are not digitized. You go to any website, that is, let's say, finance products. It's so generic that, other than, probably a contact number, you can't make out of anything of that. So how are we connecting this gap? That's a big problem. That's a pull problem. Again, that's one part of the problem, right? You are expecting farmer to go online and pull the data and act on it. It's a big problem. Now let's assume that we want to push the companies like Samunati and all these companies have great products. We want to push to the farmers or who are in need for the credit needs. The big problem that we are seeing is standardization and lack of data. Again, as an example, there is Sinduri mango from southern Andhra Pradesh is actually sold as Gulab Khas in Bihar. Right, this information asymmetry, the data asymmetry, is causing a big problem to profile, model something, and reach out to the farmers or the needy people. Push, for example, if I could be able to structure my product, targeting, micro targeting, and personalizing the loan to tomato farmers in the southern Kolar area in Karnataka, right? So that catches attention, and people come to one common stage to taking it to the further. So both push and pull models today are not working. So the discovery is one of the major problems that I see. Not defining innovative products. We do have many innovative products and they keep coming on. But the discovery and connecting these two sets of players is a big problem we see. And the data definitely can help. Particularly, I'm really gung-ho about the stack that coming up and the idea efforts that are happening. By the way, sir, I was also part of that committee that chaired in the data. So once it comes up, suddenly that it opens up many digital channels for us to push the products and engage with the farmers better to take it on to the next level.
Great, I think point well made about data standardization and I think certified data registries, which Dr. Bhanwala also mentioned, has to come through for improving the acceptability and hopefully improving the discovery by the farmers. I know we are out of time, but if it's okay, I think let audience ask a few questions. Is that okay? Sure, go ahead.
Okay, yeah, actually, like it was, I'm Sanjeev Bhatt from Humana People to People India. It was a very good learning experience for me. However, throughout the presentation, I could feel I don't know if something I have to contribute about or ask a question about. But I would say that if we can also integrate, like we have talked about the land holding of a farmer, but we have nowhere said anything about the water holding of a farmer, because water is also very crucial for a farmer, that how he can go ahead. And if he doesn't know about the availability of water for him, irrespective of how much of land he is, he'll be having a limited cultivation. So I think there's something like we should also integrate into it. I'll just give you one example. We are implementing a pilot project where farmers they understand the water behavior they have throughout the year, and how much availability and how it is going up and down throughout the year. What should the cropping pattern based on the available water they have? Do they need to have any changes to it? So this thing should also be integrated into it. And in farmers producer organization, I can see that there are a lot of services available. If I talk about access to credit, like Humana People to People India, now we are this year we are also celebrating 25 years. But when in 2002 or 3, we were trying to link the SHGs with bank for access to credit, it was very difficult. But as compared to that time, now it is much more easy, because of, I'll say that now we also have a NBFC. So it is easy for women farmers to have access to credit through this GLG model and all. So a lot of services are there, but then there is a need to integrate them into one system. So that is something which is missing. That's why, like we said about the mortality of a FPO. So an FPO could be there, all the other services are there, but there is a need of all of them to be integrated, so it becomes a part of the
Yeah.
FPO. So this is also one of the gap I can see.
Sure.
That's it. Thank you.
Thanks.
Comment rather than-
Yeah, no, but very well made comment. Thank you. Any more questions? Maybe.
Can I आपकी उससे एक विचार आया है मन में जो मैं बोल नहीं पाया था कि अगर आप जो वाटर का मुद्दा लिया ना, जैसे डिजिटाइज होता है डेटा ड्रिवन, तो मैं कुछ चीजें थी जो कुछ इंडेक्सेस थे जो अच्छी डिसीजन मेकिंग में सहायता करेंगे जो आज एब्सेंट है। एग्री इंफ्रा इंडेक्स आज की तारीख में कहीं नहीं है, हम जिसको लेवरेज करना चाहते हैं हर एक चीज के। फ्रेजिलिटी इंडेक्स जो वाटर अवेलेबिलिटी की बात की थी, कैन वी हैव सम काइंड ऑफ पीपल कमिट सुसाइड्स एंड इफ यू कैन प्रिडिक्ट दैट fragility index of this district is so high, the chances of mortality of people, not FPOs alone, are much higher. That is one. Then credit absorption capability index. We just talk about CD ratio which RBI coined in 60s, yeah. उसके beyond absorption capacity का कोई index ही नहीं है. I'm surprised. So once we have data on these lines, it will certainly help us. Then we have crop or agri diversification index is hardly there. We are talking about less water guzzling crops. So all this requires data driven approach to building some of these. I can keep on mentioning, there are one or two more, I need not. So this will lead to tools which will have which will provide a lot of easy working for not only persons working in the production space, but also in the marketing space, and also for relief assistance to the overall rural population in general.
Absolutely, sir. And if we have the index available, even the lending, the financing can be linked to it, right? Any more questions? There are two more. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. My name is Joy Mukherjee. I'm from DCM Shriram Foundation. My question to the panel is that, again, I'm coming back to the issue of water that you've just raised. And while as a matter of policy, there's a lot of emphasis on providing subsidies to water saving micro irrigation equipment, how can financing help in data around use of such irrigation equipment be linked to financing for the farmer? Is that a possibility?
It is already available.
Yeah.
Micro irrigation sets.
Data on use of micro irrigation, not.
I think
Yeah.
after financing, what happens to this? Or where it is more desirable, can you have a graded subsidy, data-driven approach? I think that's lacking, and that's a welcome suggestion. That's a welcome suggestion.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think one question, then Aline. Yeah.
Yeah, hello. Thanks everyone. I think it was a very interesting discussion. My name is Kulranjan Kujur. In terms of understanding the agriculture sector and what's happening over there, we all know that the data shows what is the growth and sometimes it's fluctuating. But what I'm quite curious to hear from anybody from the panel, beg my pardon if I'm asking the wrong question in the group, but if we see the fisheries sector, and it has been considered as the sunrise sector for the past many years, it has shown a staggering growth of more than close to 10% for the last 5, 10, whatever years. And we have very little data, or at least I'm not aware what is happening over there. So, but there is something right that is happening over there, and there is a lot of lessons that can be taken from there. So I'm just curious to know if there is anything that the panel or anybody who can share some light on that particular, like linkage between that. Thanks.
You want me to?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, thank you. I think that's a very, very important sector. And that relates to several other sectors that we were mentioning earlier, for example, horticulture as well. And one of the key reasons for some of these sectors not having adequate data sharing and things like that is because many of these sectors are predominantly, the growth that we see is predominantly and almost exclusively from just private sector. And while we do complain about, the lack of data sharing among public sector, I think the lack of data sharing among private sector is almost nil. And therefore, what requires to be done is the aggregation of some of those data, complementing some of those data, and creating common data pool for some of these sectors. And this is where the association of various private sector need to come up, because otherwise for a private sector also a lot of their energy and effort is going in data collection, which the neighboring private sector may already have. And so in the wake of data monetizing, this also can become a very interesting commercial activity for private sector to sort of monetize their data and have a common data pool as well. Fishery, for example, we even don't, you'll be very surprised, we even don't have very clear, consistent data on India's export market as well. So major data gap in that sector.
Yeah, Aline.
Thanks, Hemendra. I think very interesting. But I'm not going to ask a major question because just to respond to what Sir says, UNDP actually have a similar model doing it, what they call DICRA, Digital Initiation on Regenerative Agriculture. And they are recording what exactly you pointed out in terms of water resources, infrastructure resources, even at a block level, at a village level. And they have just started, started with Telangana. So I think it's going to, ICRISAT is also partnering with them. So soon we will see what you are saying. Just to question, actually a small question, sorry. I had it laid out because in Indian finance system, our banking system do not lend on cash flow. That is one of the major challenge. We as an NCDX wanted to develop a product on the cash flow system. And that's where we even got stuck. So I think that's a thought on the table from a policy segment that, or maybe a risk. I don't think there is any policy, it's more of a risk appetite for the Indian banking and the financial system. So why there are no products? Maybe World Bank can push to do that. Sorry, Hemendra, the last point is that we also do not have specific data required in what sector, in what segment, in what capacity. Because it's all based on individual branch managers' decision making. That standardization is also, I think, is not there. But if we do not know what data we need, then I don't think we can make any decisions.
Last
Thanks.
point, for KCC, some effort is ongoing to digitize at least the KCC flow for the lender. The data points that are required could be digitized. So RBI Hub and under Jan Suraksha portal, there are two parallel initiatives where some experiment is happening. And I think that will get going. But again, that also leads to the challenge of data absorption by banks, their ability to store. That's somewhat of a challenge, which I think efforts are on should get addressed. I agree with you on the cash flows. If banks could do it, Samunati would not be here. But somebody needs to come up and do what banks are not doing. So be it.
Great. I think we can go on and on, but in the interest of time, we'll conclude here. Thanks to all the panelists, Dr. Bhanwala, Purvi, Raj and Amit for such engaging discussion and some very insightful points. And thanks to Dvara for getting us together. Thank you very much.